Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. We are in Matthew chapter 16, and we are in the last study. I posed this question: if you could go back in time and stop uh, the death of Jesus, would you? And I see that sometimes presented in certain literature, certain, let's say Christian films. The idea that, people, wow, if you were witnessing Jesus' death, yeah, sure, a, um, you would have a emotional reaction. But as we're studying this portion here in Matthew, where Jesus tells his disciples, and this is going to be one of a few times when he tells his disciples what is about to happen to him, that he is getting ready to suffer. Now, he has told them this before, and let me bring up my let me bring up the scriptures and see where we left off. And I want to kind of dive deeper into this thought here. But let me go back to verse 21. And this is coming off of a question that he asked him too. Who do men say that I am? He asked this question: who do men say that I am? And he said, well, some say Elijah, some say Jeremiah, some say one of the prophets. And that is a very interesting, well, it's the wrong answer, because keep this in mind, we're at the end of Jesus' public ministry. In other words, not too far, he's going to go to the cross. He's going to be arrested, betrayed, arrested, go to the cross, his death, burial, and resurrection. And he tells them this. And then verse 21 says, from from then on, Jesus begins to point out to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things of the elders, chief priests, and the scribes, be killed and raised the third day. Now, again, when Peter said to him, let me go back just quickly. When he asked them here in verse 13, when Jesus came into the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do men say that the Son of Man is? And they said, some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But you, he asked them, who do you say that I am? Now again, any answer other than he is the Messiah, Son of God. In other words, if you say that he's just a good teacher, if you say that he's just a great man, you have the wrong revelation. And again, for them, at the end of his ministry, in other words, he asked, who do people say? Even the people, for them to reply, John the Baptist, Elijah, one of the prophets, having seen the miracles, having seen, heard the healings. So then Simon says, you are the Son, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Okay, and then he says, Simon, son of Jonah, you are blessed because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father in heaven. And again, Jesus has been revealing this to everyone. So in other words, it's not a unique, special revelation. It's really, okay, he's been revealing this to everyone. It is the reason why Jesus is here. It is the reason why he did all of the works. they demonstrate that he's the Messiah. So then, verse 21, he says, from then on, Jesus began to point out to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem, suffer many things from the elders, and suffer many things of the elders, chief priests, and scribes, and be killed the third day. And then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. "Oh no, Lord, this will never happen to you." Now this and Peter is this way. We're going to see even more where Peter is, let's say he is very, very, he kind of spits things out that way. But this one here, notice what Jesus says, how he responds to Peter. He says, "No." Remember, so Peter takes Jesus, right? He says, "No, this will never happen to you." And then he says, but he turned and told Peter, "Get thee behind me, Satan. You are offense to me because you're not thinking about God's concerns, but man." So I want to kind of explore this again about Satan, because I started last time in the last session, and we kind of get a little insight too, among many other scriptures, how Satan works. In our kind of today's society, and I know I can step on some people's toes, but when you think about the teachings on spiritual warfare, deliverance ministry, things like that, these are kind of over glamorized things about Satan. Let me just say something. If Satan had that kind of power that he can overtake you, and when you see movies, if you see like movies such as The Exorcist and all of the kind of demon movies, keep this in mind. These are Hollywood man-made movies, usually coming from an ungodly perspective. And they seem to have this kind of common things, that the demons are so powerful and God is so weak. Especially the preachers or the priests are so weak. Well, think about this. If Satan had that much power, wouldn't the world be worse? Wouldn't we see a lot more of that? But the reason why I'm saying that is because we do miss how he really works. And this is a good example of that. That when Jesus says, "Get thee behind me, Satan," the word Satan means adversary. And then, so we could bounce around the question, was Jesus actually calling Peter Satan, the devil? I don't believe he was. Was Peter speaking? Was Jesus speaking to who was influencing Peter, meaning Satan? Okay. And or was Peter acting unknowingly as an adversary? Now, I kind of believe both. In other words, where's Peter getting these thoughts from? And that's what I want to kind of highlight. Where's Peter getting these thoughts? So, I want to go back to, I left off and I read this verse last time in 1 Chronicles chapter 19. Let me go back. In verse 21, 1 Chronicles chapter 21. And I want you to read this. Verse 1 says, "Satan stood up against Israel to incite David to count the people of Israel." And then, so David sent Joab and the commanders of the troops, "Go and count Israel from Beersheba to Dan, and bring a report to me so I can know their numbers." So now watch that statement right there. That's the action. All of a sudden, here is David who gets this idea. Now we know, because God gives us behind the scenes revelation of what is going on. So we know now. If you if you're in the court of David, right? He's just sitting there. He gets this idea, and he says, "Hey, Joab, go count the people. Go count all of the armies." The problem with this is that God told David not to do this, and as a result of this thought, okay, as a result of this thought, let me skip down here. Verse 14 says, "So the Lord sent a plague on Israel, and 70,000 Israelite men died." Okay, and then it goes on. You can see, my point is, the result of David's disobedience, 70,000 people died. So just think about that. The thought. So in other words, how Satan kind of really works is, I mean, he is powerful. Let's go. Let me show you this. Let's go to Job, the book of Job. Job chapter 1. I'm going to skip down to verse 6. Now, let me just say this. In these first 5 verses, it really talks about how righteous Job is. And it kind of sets up the story, which we won't get into. That really there was no reason for Job to suffer the way that he suffered. No reason. But I just want you to point out, I want to point out something. Verse 6 says, "One day the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan." Now remember that word Satan means adversary. The other names for Satan is devil, which means accuser of the brethren. Then he's also known as the dragon. All right. So he says, "And Satan also came with them. The Lord asked Satan, 'Where have you come from?' 'From roaming through the earth,' Satan answered him, 'and walking around it.' And the Lord said to Satan, 'Have you considered my servant Job? No one else on earth is like him, a man of perfect integrity who fears God and turns away from evil.' Satan answered the Lord, 'Does Job fear God for nothing? Haven't you placed a hedge around him, his household, and everything he owns? Have you blessed the works of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land? But stretch out your hand and strike everything he owns, and he surely will curse you to your face.' 'Very well,' the Lord told Satan. 'Everything he owns is in your power. However, you must not lay a hand on Job himself.' So Satan left the Lord's presence." Now, very interesting how you will note, we're not going to read this story. I can carry you can read this story on your own, that Satan obeys God. In other words, he doesn't lay hands on Job. He stays right in the confines that God had given him. Now, the reason why I say that is because, again, you always hear people talk about this great conflict between good and evil, between God and Satan, and that, and at the end they're going to kind of see who wins more souls and all of that. And let me just say that there's no conflict. Let me just say there is no conflict. God is in control, as you can see here. Now, I know that this kind of certainly raises more questions. For example, this whole episode of Job raised, a lot more questions. We're just not going to get into them now. But yes, it does. But the one thing you see here is that God is very much in control. Now, here's what I want you to see right here. Verse 13 says, "One day when Job's sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and reported, while the oxen were plowing and the donkeys grazing nearby, the Sabeans came, swooped down and took them away. They struck down the servants with the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another messenger came and reported, "A lightning storm struck from heaven. It burned up the sheep and the servant and devoured them, and I alone have escaped to tell you." The messenger was still speaking. That messenger was still speaking when yet another came and reported, "The Chaldeans formed 3 bands, made a raid on the camels and took them away. They struck down the servants with the sword. I alone came to tell you." Now, I just want to stop here. There's a couple of things we can see that you can see, in a sense, Satan's abilities. Lightning. We can see wind that kind of struck down his his eldest son's house. But I want you to notice that the Chaldeans, for example, that all of a sudden this thought came in their mind, and then, because remember, all of this time before, the Chaldeans never bothered Job. All of this time, the Sabeans never bothered Job, and now all of a sudden they bother Job. Now, what am I saying? Look at this, how Satan really, when you think about now the state of the world, why is the evil happen? Who is inciting the world? So Satan incites through thoughts, and that's the point I wanted to bring out, that Satan incites through thoughts. So as you can see here, these Sabeans then did what? They committed a crime. They did some evil by what? Just robbing Job, killing the servants. Same thing with the Chaldeans. All right. So when we go back here, and he says, but he told Peter, get thee behind me, Satan, you are an offense to me. Now, what was going on here? Here's Peter get this thought, right? He is incited with this emotional thought. No, Jesus, you cannot die. But think about this. What if Jesus had obeyed? What if Jesus obeyed Satan, right? What if Jesus, yeah, Pete, you're right. Why am I going through all this, right? Why do I have to die? There was a movie came out, I think in the 80s, late 80s, caused a big stir, and it was called the Last Temptation of Christ. And in this movie, when Jesus was on the cross, he has this dream, and in the movie transitioned to a dream where Jesus, didn't die on the cross, and he lived kind of a normal life and all that kind of stuff. Well, you think about that, and then this dream right here, he lived a normal life. Him and Mary Magdalene gets it on, and they get married. I guess they have children and stuff, and he lived this life, and actually he lived the life of a normal man. And then, but the point I want to show you is, if Jesus had obeyed Peter and said, yeah, you're right, why should I die on the cross, right? These people don't even believe in me. None of us would be saved. John the Baptist's message, behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. So would Peter probably unknowingly didn't realize he was being an agent of Satan. But how did Satan do that? The thoughts. He did it by the thoughts. How does Satan control the world? By thoughts. Look at the social media. Just when you congregate people, and then you get words multiplying, knowledge. When I'm going to say knowledge, I'm saying that very generically, because it could be gossip, it could be all kinds of things that spread, and that's how Satan controls. Right? He forges thoughts, the mindset. So he plants this thought, and Jesus rebukes him. He says, get thee behind me, Satan, you are an offense to me. You are not thinking about God's concern for man. So that's, when people have these thoughts, are you thinking about God's concerns? There's a lot we can unpack with that. There's a lot we can apply to that. You're an offense to me. You're not thinking about God's concerns. There's a lot of times we don't think about God's concerns, okay? Now, verse 24, Jesus said, then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone wants to come with me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Now, this is a hard state. When we apply this to our lives, I'm going to say especially to us in America, because we are pampered. So you think about that statement here. Take up your cross, deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Verse 25, for whoever wants to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life because of me will find it. And then he goes on and says, what what will it benefit a man if he gains the whole world yet loses his soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his life? Um, Actually, let me be thinking, what would it benefit a man if he gains the whole world yet loses life? Or what will a man give in exchange for his life? So and the reason why is because, remember, whatever is in this world is temporal. And then he said, for the Son of Man is going to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will reward each according to what he has done. And then he said, I assure you there are some standing here who will not taste death as they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. But let's go back to verse 27 again. Notice he says here, for the Son of Man is going to come with his angels in the glory of his Father. So this is the promise. Now, think about how we live in this in America, and think about how that's a far off. We may see this kind of a far off promise, almost unreachable. Well, or one day, but Jesus says here, this is kind of the hope that we should be living with. What would it profit a man if he gains the whole world? Now you think about some of the richest people in the world, and of course some of us can never ever achieve that. When you have $400 billion, $600 billion, the richest man in the world, I think, is on track to maybe become the first trillionaire. But yet, he says, well, what does it benefit him if he gains the whole world? We all live in the same time frame. See, that's the difference. We all live in the same time. We all time frame, the time span. One of the most interesting things, and I'll say this as I close, one of the most interesting things is this. I remember when I used to do hospital visitations, for the church, and I would go and just sit with people. That became sort of a ministry. Just go to visit with them, whether sometimes in hospital rooms and sometimes in their homes. A lot of times they were terminally ill. And I remember some of the people that lived in picture perfect neighborhoods. You would think, oh man, what would it be like to live in this neighborhood? The Mayberry, or these nice, again, picture perfect homes. And you think about people, whether they live in poverty homes, because again, I saw all kinds. And then you would see people that would live in these homes, and you think, what does all of this profit them as they are dying of terminal cancer? Think about that. What does this all mean when they die of terminal cancer? Now let's go to the poor people now on the poor side, because again, same thing, people. But what do you think it would gain you to hope for that life you never have, right? I just kind of think about that, how it was kind of amazing. Now, those who knew Christ knew they had a better hope. And when Jesus says, what will it profit you if you gain the whole world? And the reality is, if your only hope is in your riches or the things you want to achieve in this short span of life, I think that's a whoa, whoa, whoa. All right, guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. And I will see you in the next study.